Hello, friends. Dawn Loading here, back again with my good friend Fred Cludius from Cludius Law to talk to you about estate planning. Where is everything that you've worked so hard for going to go when you're gone? Because we're all going to go. But it's very important, especially for me, like I'm trying to build something this year and really make my money start working for me and leave my kids a legacy. And I know that Fred is the biggest part of that because that's how I'm going to tell my money where to go, my wealth, my homes, my everything. So today we're going to talk about what happens if you don't have an estate plan. So thank you, Fred, for being my guest again. So tell us.
You bet. And just so I got clear, how do I
Oh, you
share
want
my
to share your
screen?
screen?
There we
Okay,
go.
so click present and
There
then
we
I'll
go.
let you
Got it.
present.
Yep.
So for those of you that don't know, Fred and I think this is our fourth call, and we have been talking about everything from what is estate planning, the difference in estate plans, and I just totally went blank. Happens at my age all the time.
What having a trust, what it
Yeah,
does.
or having a trust. We've talked about all kinds of things. And if you will, in the link to this video in the description below on this YouTube video, there is a link to join and get all of our emails straight to your inbox with all of the recordings that we've done. So if you're trying to become a better money manager this year, definitely sign up for that series. And we're going all the way through October or November. And every month I have special guests in here, and we talk about just becoming a better money manager. And that is so important. So, all right, Fred, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then Fred's going to share with us today. He has some slides. There we go.
Did the share screen work? Okay, good deal.
Yep.
Good deal.
I'll take
So, Don, a lot of people, as we've talked about in other sessions, don't have an estate plan. 2/3, 65% of all adults don't have an estate plan. When I say they don't have an estate plan, they haven't prepared one, because really everybody has an estate plan. The problem is that the state of Texas dictates what your estate plan is if you have not prepared one. And in Texas, this is called intestate succession. So basically, the state of Texas says, hey, if you have not designated who you want to have your stuff when you die, we're going to step in and we're going to tell your estate, your loved ones, where your property's going. That's called intestate succession. And there's several different factors that we have to know where your property goes. There's a common misconception that, I'm married, everything's going to my wife. Not necessarily. It depends on several different factors. First is, if you're married, is the property you have community property or separate property? If you have children, do you have all of your children, also all of your spouse's children, or are there stepchildren involved? Are there a his, hers, and ours situation? All of that can affect where your property goes. And then the final thing you have to ask is it real property, or is it separate property, is it personal property? So let's define some of these terms.
Great. This is really good, Fred. Thank you.
You bet. Separate property versus community property. You may think, well, gee, I only need to worry about that if I'm going through a divorce. Well, no, hopefully you never have to go through that. But if you do die, you do have to worry about, or your spouse has to worry about, is what I had separate property, or was it community property? So just generally, separate property is going to be anything that you came into the marriage with, or it's going to be something that you inherited after the marriage. And that's a generalization. There are other factors involved, but I'm not here to give a complete legal analysis today, but just kind of give you an introduction. And then it's going to be what kind of property are we talking about? Are we talking about real property or personal property? Now, real property is exactly what we're talking about, is real estate. It's what you're interested in. But in addition to being just real estate, we're also looking at things like, do you have mineral royalty rights? Do you have a interest in property that's a life estate? What's a life estate? A life estate is where you have a right to a piece of property or a mineral interest or a royalty interest in a piece of property for your life. And after that, then the property reverts to another owner, either an original owner or somebody else that has the remainder estate at that point. So you can actually own something only for life. And an owner of a life estate, it's not like they just get to use it free of charge. They're responsible for maintaining the property. They're responsible for paying property taxes, and they've got to pay interest on any mortgages on the property. If there's a mortgage on the property, the principal amount is paid by who the actual owner is behind there, but the life estate owner has to pay the interest on a mortgage. So all these things can factor into what happens to your estate when you die. I'm going to try to pull up another one here real quick. Here we go. So now that we've talked about very briefly and very quickly, I apologize if I've gone through it too fast, what is separate versus community, what is personal versus real property. And I didn't talk about personal property because personal property is really anything that's not real property.
Like guns or the things in your safe, or I mean, you could even get down to your animals, right?
Exactly. In Texas, animals are, and most places around the world, animals are considered property. And so animals, cars, jewelry, anything tangible, bank accounts, all of that stuff is personal.
Yeah. These are things that so many people don't really take into account, even if you don't own real estate. I mean, the whole purpose of this, of having Fred on, is because I am first a real estate agent and I wanted to really help my clients plan and this year. And so, but the deeper we get into it, the more I just think, oh my gosh, I just don't even have a plan for that. So I'm going to be perfectly honest. Like, I'm still working with Fred on getting mine done. And I have encouraged my in-laws to get their done. And they're now ahead of me and have an appointment set. And so I'm like, okay, well, I got to get busy. But, what if something happens to me and my husband and we have no plan?
And Dawn, the thing that most of us look at on this is that we think, you know what, that's something I don't have to worry about right now. I'm young.
That's exactly what I thought.
I'm in good health. I don't have to worry about that. We all put our seatbelt on when we get in a car, and we do it not thinking we're going to get in a wreck, but thinking, what if, just in case. We lock our kids in those car seats like we should, because of the same thing. Not that we think there's gonna be a wreck, but on that chance that it does happen.
Exactly.
I hate to break it to your viewers, but every single one of us is gonna die.
No.
None of us get the exception. And we need to prepare for it because we don't know when it's going to happen. We hope, and I hope for everyone watching this, that it's a long time into the future, but it can happen. So
exactly. All right. Well, I
Let's talk
mean,
about
so the
what
personal property.
what happens. So if you are married and you have children, here's what the state of Texas says. It is how your property is split. So your separate personal property that you brought into the marriage, 1/3 of it goes to the surviving spouse, and 2/3 of it goes to the children. That's on personal property. And that doesn't matter whether you have stepchildren or your children are also your spouse's children. That's the split.
Wait a
Only, you
minute.
only get a third
Wait a
of that
minute.
personal property.
Wait a minute here. So that means, let's just give a for instance. So I don't have my estate plan done. I'm married. However, I have two children from my previous marriage. So if something were to happen to me, it doesn't all just go to my husband.
You're correct. Any personal property that you had that's separate, not the community property that you have with your husband, but anything that's separate property. So if you brought in property to the marriage, then that separate property only belongs 1/3 to your spouse, but 2/3 to your children if you die right now. Now, it also includes any inheritance that you get because that's also uh, your separate personal property. We'll talk about real estate here in just a minute
Okay.
because that's treated a little bit differently. But this is the personal property aspect of it, definitely.
Gotcha.
So now let's say you either brought in or inherited a piece of real estate. Or let's say you brought in or you inherited mineral royalty interests, because that's still considered real property as well. Then, and you die, then your spouse gets that 1/3 life estate in the real estate property or in the mineral interest. So for their life, they have a right, 1/3 right to that property, which I went through it quickly earlier, I know, but that life estate is there. You still are responsible for maintenance on the property, and you only have that right for life, which means you can't sell the property really. You can't do anything with it. You just have the right to use it for life. Your children all take equally, subject to the surviving spouse's 1/3 life estate. So your husband could say, you know what, I'm living in this house. If it was your house before, and it wasn't community property, I'm gonna live in this house until I die. And the kids, they may own it, but they don't have a right to it at this point because I'm still living. So that's what happens if there's no estate plan in place. Um, so let's see, community property. How is community property? Oops. How is
Sorry.
community property handled? So you and your husband own a house, and you pass away. Then, if you don't have any sort of a will in place or a trust in place, what happens to your real estate depends on whether your children are also his children, or whether there's stepchildren involved. So when all their surviving children and descendants of the deceased person are also the children of the descendant and descendants of the surviving spouse, then everything does go to the surviving spouse. All the community property goes to the surviving spouse. I mean, we were just talking about separate property, but now we're talking about community property. So if your children are also his children, then it all goes to the surviving spouse. But whether, without making any social commentary, and that's not necessarily going to be the situation for, frankly, most families. They're going to have some sort of a blended family type aspect these days. And if that happens, if the children that you have are outside the existing marriage, or some of the children you have are outside the existing marriage, then all of your half of the community estate would go to your children and not to your spouse. So your spouse could all of a sudden find themselves owning half of their house or half of any other community property that there could be out there. They get to retain their half, but your half, if you were to die, would go to your children. Let's take a look at the next one, and that is if you're married and there's no children. So if you're married and there's no children, then the separate personal property, again, not real estate, but just personal property, all goes to the surviving spouse at that point. And remember, this is what, if you don't have an estate plan, happens.
Yeah, all of this is what if you don't have one.
Exactly. So all separate personal property goes to the surviving spouse. And then let's jump down to the bottom here. All community property goes to the surviving spouse as well. So married with no children, everything goes to the surviving spouse except for separate real estate. So if somebody in the relationship dies and they brought in a piece of real estate, or they inherited a piece of real estate, then there's several different things that could happen depending on whether parents are living or not, or whether there's descendants or siblings living or not. So,
Which you could avoid all of this by just doing your estate plan.
Exactly. So, if you die and no parents are living and you have no siblings or descendants of a sibling, then it does all go to the surviving spouse. But otherwise, you pretty much look at it as half of that separate property goes to your dad, half of the separate property goes to your mom. If one of them are not living, then that would pass to siblings. Some to surviving spouse, some to siblings, some to mother and father. And here is kind of the mishmash, frankly, of what happens. And usually half does go to a surviving spouse, but then the other half can be split among mom, dad, siblings, kids. It could get real messy real quick.
Gotcha.
So what if you're unmarried? You have not gotten married, or you're divorced or widowed, and you die. Then you have children or grandchildren, other descendants. Then everything goes to the kids, goes to the descendants who take equally. So that's pretty simple. What if you are unmarried and you have no children, no descendants, no grandchildren, nothing like that that's surviving? Then you're looking at basically kind of half goes to mom, half goes to dad if they're both living. If they're not, if one of them has deceased, but you do have siblings, or siblings have kids that have survived, then half goes to the surviving parent and half goes to your siblings. If you're survived by one or the other, mother or father, but you don't have any surviving siblings or their descendants, then all would go to the surviving parent. If neither parent is surviving, but you do have siblings or their descendants, then all would go to the siblings or their descendants. Again, all sorts of confusing, and I'm going through it rather quickly, which I apologize, but I know I don't want to spend a lot of time boring people.
Yeah, definitely people can reach out to you because everybody is different. So
exactly.
You're just trying to give us an overview. So we appreciate that.
Exactly. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different situation that doesn't necessarily fit into a neat package where it all goes to who you think it should go to. And there's other problems with not having a will or a trust in place, and that have to do with the process of going through probate. There are extra steps, extra expenses involved when you haven't established things with a will or a trust. And we can talk about that another time, about all the technical aspects of that, because that's its own subject, really.
Yeah, I've had that come up several times in my real estate career where either people needed to go through a probate, or, just title had to do certain things because one party has been deceased. Like that's happened a lot of times with listings that I've had. So it's
Yeah,
definitely nice when they have an estate plan. But I will tell you, it has been far fewer times than it has been where they've had it.
right. Back to that, 2/3 of us don't have an estate plan in place, and so if you've done that, you don't have one in place, then you're going to be facing these situations, or actually, your loved ones are going to have to face these
Yeah.
situations. Um,
Yeah.
and having been through it myself, I can tell you that having a plan in place is so much easier, because it takes such a burden off of people, that they don't have to mess with, gee, this is where it's going, which is okay, but it's not what this person wanted, or having to have the deal with the courts, or worst case, finding all of a sudden yourself owning half of what you've built, because all of a sudden you haven't done something and you have stepkids, and you find out that you now own half your house, or half of other community property, because it's going to
Yeah.
your spouse's children at that
People
point.
don't realize this. We don't, well, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm 53 years old. I still feel like I'm 20 something. So you don't realize and think about this. And I remember even being younger and just really thinking, oh, I'm not going to do life insurance. I'm not going to do this. I'm just not even going to think about any of that. Like the law of attraction is going to work. And by thinking about it, I'm going to cause it to happen. Like, no, that's not smart. And the whole point of why we're doing this is so that we can all become better money managers. And that includes all things that has to do with your money, including what happens to it when you leave. So, Fred, you're awesome. I
Being
put
a
your
good
website
steward.
up here. I'm going to put that also on the YouTube video. And we're working on ours, just so you know. I know my in-laws have an appointment. I'm having to send them deeds and stuff like that. So as soon as they're done, I'm going to turn ours in and we're going to get ours going. So
Fantastic. I look
appreciate
forward to
you.
helping you, because I think it's really
Yeah,
important that not only do you build that wealth, but you're good stewards of it, not only while you're living, but as you pass it on to your loved ones who you want to have it when you're gone.
exactly. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much. We will see you back here next month, same time, same place, and we will see you then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.